Welcome to Spinning Back Clique each week here at MMA Junkie. We take a spin through the biggest topics in the sport. This week, we have both Matthew Wells and Nolan King from MMA Junkie, as well as gorgeous George Garcia from MMA Junkie Radio. So let's just jump right into it, guys. And the biggest story in MMA this past weekend was obviously Dustin Poirier picking up a TKO win over Conor McGregor, though it was one that had kind of a bizarre ending with McGregor stepping back awkwardly and snapping his leg, rendering him unable to continue. Now, the surgery is done at this point. We know he's got some serious recovery ahead, but he's also got some choices to make about where he goes from here. Now, it seems like all parties involved want a fourth fight with Dustin Poirier at some point, but lay out the future for Conor McGregor. Where does he go from here? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, get it started.
Well, in about 6 weeks, he's going to go to physical therapy, and then after that, we can figure out the next steps. But I think we're probably looking at about a year off for him at the earliest. I mean, you think back to Anderson Silva, he was a year and a month removed from his injury before he returned against Nick Diaz. So I think the path should be let's keep with that same time frame with Diaz as well. So let's run back that trilogy with Nate and go ahead and close up that rivalry as well. It's a winnable fight for Conor. It's one that he's won recently. He won the second fight. So it bodes well for him. It's a good matchup. He doesn't have to worry about leg kicks, throwing them or receiving them. I mean, he could hit Nate with a million leg kicks, and Nate's still just going to keep doing his thing. So he could win that fight just using his hands, which I think is a fight that he needs to do on his way back.
That's actually quite interesting. You know, I was thinking when you said Nate Diaz, of course, we all want to see that fight. And he's a guy that doesn't fight all that frequently, you know, so he doesn't mind sitting out for a while. So you're right. I love all those. I didn't even think about not having to worry about the leg kick option as well. That's not bad. That's not bad. All right, Nolan, what do you think? Is that the fight to make, or do you see a different path for Conor McGregor?
I think it has to be Nate Diaz. You know, we heard for years. I was always somebody that, like, after Conor, every single one of his fights, I was like, oh, you know, he lost. Now's the time for the Nate Diaz fight. In the UFC, to their credit, at the time I didn't agree with them, but now I do. They kind of held that fight in their back pocket, right? Waiting for the right time, waiting for the time where that was the fight they needed potentially to boost Conor's stock. And I think that we've hit that point. I mean, at this point in time, I think Conor needs a win. He'll always be a draw. I think he could lose his next 5 fights and people will still dig him. People will still tune in. He'll still have that broader audience. But at some point, people are going to look at it like, hey, you know, here's Conor. He's trying to get that win again. Like, he just keeps beating his head against the wall, and he can't pick it up. So I think the Nate fight is very winnable for him. It's one that, like everybody said, from Dana White to fighters to fans, it's something that we need to see happen before all is said and done. And what better time than right now? You know, honestly, it's a fight that, like Matt said, Conor's looking at a long recovery, but it doesn't really matter. It's one of those fights you can book whenever, regardless of the context, because these two guys don't really fit in the picture in a traditional way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point as well, Nolan. Those two guys, you can kind of pluck and move around and make fights, and nobody's going to ask, well, why? That doesn't make sense with the rankings. You know, it's no interim heavyweight title shot or something like that. You know what I mean? You can put those guys together anytime you want. So, George, what about you? It sounds like everybody wants that fight next, and I think these two guys have laid it out why it makes a lot of sense. Is there any other path? And let me ask you another question. If Dustin Poirier wins the title against Charles Oliveira, does that mean that fight's out of the question, or could they still make it with him holding a title? What do you see playing out here, George?
All right, so of course, when these guys are talking about Diaz, man, count me in for sure. But Diaz just fought, and it sounded like this time I actually want to turn it around a lot quicker. And Matt nailed it. I think it's about a year-long injury if we're really, really being serious here. So I just think Diaz is going to fight sooner. I don't know. I don't know if he'll run it back BMF style or just take on somebody else. But something tells me I think when it comes to these guys, ego comes into play. And maybe Diaz might feel like, well, I'm not waiting for him. You know, there's one guy that I think's kind of, hit a losing streak. He's still a big name. They had a little bit of a rivalry, I guess, within the managerial team that they're part of. And that's Tony Ferguson. With Tony Ferguson, I think a lot of us said, hey, take some time off and then come back. I'd love to see Conor take a warm-up fight before he fights Poirier again. I guess I can be convinced that we need to see a fourth, even though I feel it was technique that broke his leg, and therefore Dustin's clearly up 2-1. But look, if he's going to run it against Dustin, if Dustin can get past Oliveira, to just walk into a title shot when you got all the mother killers like RDA and Makhachev, you're going to have to probably take a fight. In the meantime, I like Tony Ferguson in that spot right there.
Not a bad idea with Tony Ferguson. Yeah, I completely agree, guys. By the way, if Dustin Poirier does win the title, you can't make that fight. I'm sorry. I don't care how popular Conor McGregor is. You can't give him a title shot right now. He's going to have to win some fights. But if he loses, maybe 4's out there. Hey, guys, beyond what happened in the cage, the ongoing discussion seems to be about the trash talk that took place before and even after the fight. Now, on the one hand, there's, of course, the idea out there that, hey, this is the fight game. People are going to say mean things. Don't get your feelings hurt. But what do you think? I mean, you start talking about family, you know, wives. You start talking about death. I mean, did McGregor cross any lines here? I mean, what should the limit be, if there is one, when it comes to talking trash? We'll put 4 minutes on the clock again. Nolan, get us started.
Yeah, it's a tough question, right? Because I've always been somebody that appreciates the fact that in MMA, people can act somewhat unprofessional. You know, how boring would our sport be if people weren't able to talk trash at the press conference, if they had canned answers, if they weren't able to show their personality, if things weren't, you know, to get a little heated from time to time. But at the same time, I do understand where Dustin's coming from. It seems to me that Conor certainly crossed some lines with some of the verbiage he was using before the fight, which I thought was bad enough. But then after the fight, I think is what really got to me. You know, usually at that point in time, the dust kind of settles. People, even if they don't like each other, they at least shake hands and they go on their way. But just the way that Conor was almost, you know, frothing at the mouth, yelling those insults, doing what Poirier claims is, you know, pointing to his head and doing the gun thing. If that's what happened, I mean, that's kind of taking it an additional step too far. And I guess we start to get into kind of messy territory, right, when it comes to like, what kind of repercussions are they going to give fighters? Who's even going to give it? Would it be the commission? Would it be the UFC? Like, you know, who's the committee to decide what's too far and what's not? So, I mean, the court of public opinion, I think, is frowning upon this, which is good. I'm just not sure how much it can be actually regulated in this sport. But to me, yeah, I mean, when you start going, post-fight death threats are not something that I think many people enjoy seeing after a fight like that.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of interesting points there, why there's so many questions. Like you said, where's the limit? How do you even enforce the limit? That sort of thing. The post-fight stuff was bad, but I keep reminding myself that he was sitting there with a broken leg. I mean, that couldn't have felt very good. So, George, what do you think? Were any lines crossed here? What is the limit supposed to be?
They were crossed. And usually I don't think we should go the route of moms, wives, kids, things like that. But you know, Muhammad Ali and a few of the guys from pro wrestling got clever and witty with it. You know, by the time I'm done, yo, mama ain't gonna recognize. You know, I get that. You know, because I think there's a little bit of humor in something like that, and I don't think the parties would get too offended. But calling someone's wife a hoe, I mean, come on, that's just completely unnecessary. And then when it comes to like the death talk, I think there's enough by saying I'm sending you off on a stretcher, I'm knocking you the F out, things like that. I don't think you have to go to the morgue and the coffin route or whatever, because it's just not really necessary. I mean, you guys are already badasses. We get it. So the fact that you're going to remove somebody from consciousness, you know, and take their title or get paid, and that's good enough. I mean, kicking somebody's ass is what the UFC is all about, as real as it gets. So give us some form of that. Everything else is just completely unnecessary.
Yeah, I agree. The death talk was a little bit jarring. And I'll be honest, I feel like it's a little bit lazy in terms of trash talk. You know, I mean, he's so much more clever. I mean, he's some of the greatest one-liners in history, you know, and he just didn't do it. Matt, what about you? Did Conor cross any lines here? And where the heck are the lines even supposed to be?
Yeah, I don't know where the lines are supposed to be, man. It's weird because this is one of those things that's unique to combat sports where these guys are free to just say whatever they want before the fight, before competition, after competition. You know how the UFC loves to draw parallels to other like major sports leagues and everything like that. We generally don't hear like about the trash talk between the athletes until like years down the road. Like we didn't hear about Michael Jordan be like the most epic trash talker in basketball until years later. But in fighting, we hear about it before they fight, during the fight, after the fight. You know, it's right there in front of our eyes at all times. And there's not really a good way to police it because there's so many different things that can come into play there. You know, you give leeway to certain fighters. Conor, you're pretty much going to not want to ever muzzle Conor, right? But at the same time, you don't want them going out there and saying these sort of things that he was saying, especially like the death threats and things like that. Because what happens if someone actually dies? You know, it would just be a bad look for the entire sport, the entire organization as well. So you got to avoid that as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it's family, race, and religion. Leave those things out of the trash talk. They don't belong. And the death thing, I think, is inappropriate, too, just because I say it, and I know it's not fun to talk about. Somebody is going to die in the UFC at some point. You know what I mean? It is a combat sport with danger and people putting their health on the line. And I don't think things that you want to joke about or use to promote fights, because it's a very serious consequence. These guys are really putting their bodies on the line out there. So it's tough. Like you said, there's nobody policing it. It's like we all got to agree to it, you know, internally. And who knows if that'll ever happen. So, guys, Dustin Poirier does appear destined to fight Charles Oliveira for the undisputed UFC lightweight title later this year. And it's almost incredible that they haven't fought each other yet in their lengthy careers. And of course, Poirier has already passed on one shot at the belt to take the money fight, right? That's why he was in this one. So I'll give you two ways to answer this question. Is there a better fight on the table right now for Dustin Poirier? Another money fight? And if it is, tell us why that's the one to take. Or if you think there's not, and it's got to be Oliveira, give us your way too early prediction for how this fight is going to play out. 4 minutes on the clock. George, get us started.
Wow, more lucrative. I hate to say it. I know people shudder at the thought of hearing Jake Paul's name, but I think if Dana White really wanted to shut Jake Paul up and get Dustin Poirier paid, send him over there. If he's not going to fight Oliveira, get him paid, and I think he'll handle the business for you. Dustin's got some hands on him, and, you know, he's popping right now. Let's face it. You know, he is a superstar for the UFC. It's a long shot. I get it, you know, but that's about the only thing I can think of that's more lucrative because, again, Conor's on the shelf for the next year. But no, man, listen, Dustin Poirier was asked at UFC 257, hey, would you retire? He said, no, man, I still feel like I need to be the undisputed champ. That's my goal. He was the interim champ, but he wants to be the undisputed champ. So you got to throw him in there against Charlie Olives. And how I break it down is going back to how I started. Boxing, those hands. His hands are really nice. And he mixes in, you know, now some wrestling, some calf kicks. We know that the later the fight goes, the stronger he gets. He's full of confidence. The game is in slow motion for Dustin Poirier. And my early lean is Dustin Poirier by KO over Charles Oliveira.
I hate the fact that we even have to bring up Jake Paul in conversations like this, but you do, right? I mean, there's big money on the table. And you know what? I think if I know Dustin, I think he would box Jake on Friday and fight Charles on Saturday. You know what I'm saying? All right. What about you, Matt? What do you think? Is there another, you know, option you see on the table, or is this the fight to make? And if so, how does it go?
It's definitely the fight to make for me. You know, contrary to some reports that have been floating around the internet about the wrong people winning in the UFC, that's not how things work when it comes to real fighting. And Dustin Poirier, if you do want to kind of add in that sort of element to the thing, why would you not want that guy to be the face of your franchise, so to speak, right? Spoke so well the entire week. Just let the trash talk of Conor just roll off his back, and then bigged up charitable organizations throughout the entire time as well. That's a guy that you want holding a title in your organization. So it has to be a title fight next, if you're asking me. And as far as a prediction of that fight goes, I would expect nothing less than just fireworks. I don't know how it would actually play out because Charles Oliveira brings an incredible X factor with that grappling. And of course, as we saw, the way he won the title as well, he can crack too. So that fight would just be a 50-50 coin flip for me. But man, put me in for that. Any main event, anytime within the next year, I'm here for that.
Yeah, great points there, man. I mean, can you imagine Dustin Poirier, you know, undisputed UFC champion? What a great guy representing the brand, representing the sport. I'm sure some companies would come calling for him with some sponsorship deals. I think it'd be very lucrative for him. Nolan, what about you? Is there another fight to make? If not, is he going to be a belt holder, or is Charles Oliveira going to keep it?
Yeah, I think it's 1,000,000,000% the fight to make, Dustin Poirier versus Charles Oliveira. I think both guys, you know, Charles, he's the title holder, right? And now he's going to get a big, you know, title challenger for his first defense. He's going to make a lot of money probably from that fight. He deserves it. On the flip side, Dustin Poirier, I mean, talk about a feel-good story if he were to come back and win that title after all the trials and tribulations he's had throughout the past decade or so. So I think it's definitely the fight to make. As far as my way too early prediction, I am leaning with Dustin inside the distance, probably by TKO, as was said before me here. I just, you know, Charles, his striking has come along so far offensively, but I still think he's susceptible to get hit, as we saw in the Michael Chandler fight. Even if he's got some more heart or better chin or whatever people attribute it to, he can take a punch. But I think this is Dustin's time. He's got a lot of momentum, and he'll get it done with strikes.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I'll be honest, I was kind of nervous that he even took this fight. You know, George referenced that thing where he said, look, I got to win this title at some point in my career. And I was like, man, please don't lose this fight and not get that other opportunity. So there's no other fight to make right now. That's got to be it. And I'm excited for it because those are two dangerous athletes. Oliveira hitting his prime as well. Man, that'll be a phenomenal fight later this year. Can't wait to see it happen. Well, guys, the co-main event, UFC 264, saw Gilbert Burns pick up a big win over Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, even if it wasn't the most exciting contest of all time. Now, afterwards, he said he'd be up for a fight with Leon Edwards, Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal. He'll take any of them. It seems like the UFC is pretty set right now on Usman versus Covington 2 for the title fight. But then you got a whole bunch of other fighters with their hands in the air saying, give me some big fights. I got to get up in the rankings. So, guys, let's make Sean Shelby's job easy for him. How do you book out this welterweight division with all these names on the table right now? Let's put 4 minutes on the clock. Matt, get us started.
Well, first off, I'm shaking up the whole thing because, you know, if they want to go with Usman Covington too, I'm not on board with that. I want to shake it all up. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to slide in Leon Edwards against Kamaru Usman. The guy's been on a ridiculous win streak. In fact, Colby doesn't deserve it because Leon's fought twice since Colby last fought. And although one of those got overturned to a no contest due to the eye poke against Bilal Muhammad, it doesn't matter. He made 2 walks to the octagon since the last time Colby Covington fought. So that's my main title fight matchup right there. Now, what you do with Gilbert Burns is put Colby Covington against him. That would be an amazing fight. You got 2 grapplers. So let's see whose striking prevails in that one because, you know, the grappling could just cancel each other out. Obviously, I think Gilbert Burns is a little bit better when it actually gets to the ground, but Colby, I mean, his wrestling is top notch. I mean, you got to give him credit for that, no matter what you think of his personality and how he chooses to promote himself. But that's how I'm shaping up the division right now. Give me the grappler versus grappler, so to speak, matchup, and let's see who can prevail in that. And then the winner of that gets the title shot out of the winner between Leon and Kamaru Usman.
Some fun matchups with those big names. Although I did say make Sean Shelby's job easier. Now he's got to go tell Dana he's not making the title fight he already said was happening. That's not making the job any easier. But I like it. I like it. There's a lot of people I know that would make happy pulling Colby Covington out of that spot. So, Nolan, what do you think? How would you book out this 170-pound division?
You know, as fun as it sounds to have Matt Wells replace Dana White with the matchmaking, I'm going to be the boring realist here and kind of just throw at you what I think the most realistic scenario here is. And I think that's Usman versus Covington, and poor Leon Edwards will get left out again. But I think he needs to make sure, Leon, if he takes one more fight, which seems like is the road that the UFC is pushing him down, he needs to fight a fight that makes sense, a top contender fight. I think what kind of worked against him in this whole matchmaking scheme was, you know, he fought backwards against Bilal Muhammad, didn't really necessarily make the most sense, short notice fight, whatever. Then he fought Nate Diaz, which, again, like kind of a fight that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. So when you fight guys back like that, even if they're big fights or you know, notable up-and-comers or notable soon-to-be contenders, you don't have a step up on these other guys at the top of the division, right? You don't. When the UFC is going to matchmake, they can't come and say, hey, we can't give this guy a big fight because Leon already beat him. He deserves that fight. So Leon's going to fight somebody that's top-notch. I like the Gilbert Burns fight. I think it kind of plays into that thing we talked about earlier in terms of keeping big matchups in the UFC's back pocket. They can make a Masvidal fight whenever. People will want to see that. But I think Leon needs to fight a big name. Guy coming off a win like Gilbert would really solidify him to be the #1 contender and force the UFC's hand for him to fight the winner of Usman Covington.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of a purist booking right there, right? The actual top-ranked guys going against each other, going for the title shot. It's not bad. George, what do you think? Is that the way to do it, or do you see another way that might generate a little more fan interest?
Gotcha. Yeah, Nolan, Matt, love you guys, man. But seriously, I think you guys made some good points, and then you left some heat out, some possible heat. In Matt's scenario, we got Edwards versus the champ. But how are you going to leave out Covington and Masvidal from not colliding and settling that 305 beef? And then in Nolan's situation, he's leaving out the possible 3-piece Minnesota beef by matching up Burns versus Edwards. No. Let's go with the question itself. They said, you know, let's make Sean Shelby's job easier. They're already going to do Usman versus Covington. It's been reiterated over and over, so let's do that. And then they're already warmed to Edwards versus Masvidal, so we got a heated matchup there. For Burns, I'm going to give you – you're going to have to wait 3 weeks, all right? But in 3 weeks, I got a perfect opponent for you. The winner of Vicente Luque and Michael Chiesa. They fight in early August. The winner of that obviously will have some buzz around them. And I think it would be a good matchup for Gilbert Burns. And again, we preserve some of these other matchups, and then we create some heat in some of those other ones that definitely need to be done.
Can always trust George not to leave a grudge match on the table. He's going to put those things together so we get the cheap heat. I like it. Look, there's a lot of interesting fights to make there. Can't wait to see how it all shakes out. Guys, an interesting debate coming out of this past weekend's event is in the stoppage of Sean O'Malley versus Chris Moutinho. Now, the fight was clearly in O'Malley's favor, but Moutinho showed incredible heart in refusing to go away, though the fight was ultimately waved off with 27 seconds left to go. My question is, was this a good stoppage or a bad one? Let's go speed round on this one. Let's put 2 minutes on the clock. Nolan, get us started.
Yeah, I think I always talk about stoppages as being ranges, right? So I think this fell within an acceptable range. I think two things. The referee has to know the context of the fight. Chris Moutinho took a lot of damage throughout that entire span of the fight. And the second thing is it's not the referee's job to kind of boost the fighter up for moral victory, right? So while that sequence might not seem like it was the craziest thing, you know, the context built up to it, and then the referee's not supposed to be, you know, too concerned with the clock or anything like that. So I think it was an okay stoppage by Herb.
I agree. The referees have the mechanics. They've evolved over time. And what happens is when they show concern towards the fighters, because they've obviously been hit with a strike, they're looking in their eyes, and Herb got closer, crouched down, was really, really observing Coutinho. He had already, you know, taken into account that Moutinho had been getting served up throughout the fight. He was also, you know, doling out some damage as well, but he was taking most of it. So when he got close and then communicated with Moutinho that he needed to see something else out of him, and then boom, all of a sudden he got hit with a combo. He jumped in at the right time. On fight night, I was a little like, I was a little more emotional. But, you know, once he come down a little bit and keep it real, Herb did a great job. Great stoppage.
Fantastic stoppage by Herb. I can't understand why so many people were upset with it. It just made sense. Chris Moutinho is a UFC debuting fighter. He hasn't earned that, you know, that extra punishment, so to speak, through his resume. We haven't seen it from him before, and maybe next time out, a ref will give him a little bit more leeway on that because they saw him take a lot of punishment. But for a guy that we don't really know how he's going to perform on that stage, yeah, you're gonna err on the side of caution here and stop the fight when it needed to be stopped. And I thought it was fantastic because he wasn't going to do anything spectacular. Like we were waiting for what, like the Nate Diaz, Leon Edwards moment where he lands like one big punch to rock him. Like, is that what we were looking for there? I don't know. Good stoppage.
Yeah, you know what? I'll be honest with you. You know, the exact timing of it, I was a little, but I'll be honest with you too. I didn't even think they should send him out for round 2, you know? So if I'm wanting to stop it at the end of round 1, how can you argue they get stopped there? And listen, you don't know what's going to happen in that last 27 seconds, man. It could be catastrophic. You can't assume it's just going to be what we've seen up to that point. So I'm on the side of a good stoppage as well. And hey, if Moutinho was feeling bad about it, he's got 75,000 reasons to feel a little bit better about it today. You know what I'm saying? So, guys, finally, this weekend's UFC on ESPN 26 marks the return of former women's bantamweight champion Miesha Tate after nearly 5 years away from competition. I want to ask you, is this a good idea for her? It's been so long in the layoff, and what should we expect out of her in her return? Let's go speed round again here. 2 minutes on the clock. George, get us started.
You know, Miesha Tate her resume speaks for itself. Former Strikeforce bantamweight champ, former UFC bantamweight champ. So you got to take her serious, and that she's going to come back as close to as what she was when she was at the top. She's got a formidable opponent in Marion Renault that I think will give us a right test. And by the way, that's her final fight as well. So kind of a special fight between two ladies that have put in their time, you know, in women's MMA. But the performance will speak more to us. You know, does she have enough to unseat Amanda Nunes? Does anyone at this point? I don't know. And could she really be next when you have GDR knocking everybody off? Aspen Ladd only has one loss. You know, I don't know that this will determine if she's a title contender, but I think it'll determine at least if she's here to stay.
No, I think it's a good return. Why not? I'm not against the return itself. I'm more so in favor of the actual matchup that she's having on her return. Marion Renault was on a 4-fight losing streak, and like George mentioned, on her way out. Like, this is her last fight. So this is a good test to see where Miesha still is at this point in her career upon her return. Does she still have enough in the tank to make one last run? We'll find out. I don't necessarily believe that it's possible to go out and, you know, compete against the level of Amanda Nunes again, because we saw how that went. So it's a good fight. Go ahead, make some fans again, you know, have some fun memories. It's a good return for sure.
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said here. I think it's you know, it was out of left field. It was a little unexpected, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, she was competing at a championship level before she lost. And she admitted that she needed that mental refresher. And I think sometimes as media, we don't even understand sometimes the mental, you know, the ringer that these athletes have to go through. So for her to be able to kind of move away from the sport, not think about competing and come back fresh, I'm excited to see what she looks like. And why not? You know, she might regret it if this was 5 years from now and she hadn't done it. So good on her. I'm interested to see how she looks.
Yeah, great points all the way around, guys. I'm not worried about Miesha Tate coming back here. I think you guys all hit the nail on the head. She was competing at a championship level. She needed a mental refresh, a mental break from the sport. You know, she got her family started. She stayed training the whole time. She's been around it. I think it's good. Now, I don't think she should be handed anything. It's been long enough. The divisions move forward. If she's going to come back in a title shot at some point, she's got to earn her way there. I don't think you just hand it to her after this much time away, but I know that she wouldn't want it any other way. She'd want to earn her way back there. Bellator 262, UFC on ESPN 26, KSW is over in Poland. LFA is heading down to Brazil for the first time, so a lot of fights to talk about, and we'll get to it all next week on Spin.